ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Morning Brews. My name is Ryan Smeltz, and I will tell you, after the morning I have had, I definitely need my caffeine fix. A little pick-me-up of coffee to get me started, so I have that pot brewing right now. And speaking of coffee, this episode is proudly sponsored by Soldier Girl Coffee. If you have not checked them out, the link is in the show notes. You can go to our website, businessandbrewshow.com, click on sponsors, and learn all about a veteran-owned coffee company, a female veteran-owned coffee company. She was a medic in the Army, and now she runs one of the fastest growing veteran coffee companies that is out there. So be sure to check her out. One of my favorite things that really sets Carrie apart from other veteran-owned coffee companies is that she does a lot to support the veteran community and puts in a lot of efforts to stop and help stop veteran suicide. So that's fantastic, as well as her coffee is one of the only veteran-owned coffee companies or veteran-owned coffees that comes CBD infused. So if you are not using CBD, I encourage you to check her out. She has a lot of information on the website in that manner. And also, if you do use CBD, then I encourage you to check her coffee out because, like I said, it is one of the only veteran-owned CBD coffee companies out there, and she has a lot of fantastic flavors. French vanilla, caramel, southern pecan. So be sure to check out her website. Once again, that link is in the show notes as well. So jumping into today's episode, this week we are talking about planning, and today we are talking about sticking to your plan. So if you haven't heard Monday and Tuesday's episode, be sure to go back and check those out. We talk about planning your week and planning your day. Today we are talking about sticking to your plan. So I want to start this off by, taking you back to a time where you either tried to schedule something with someone or someone scheduled something with you, okay? And for one reason or another, that person didn't get to the phone, didn't answer the phone. They were supposed to call you and they didn't. Whatever the case may be, okay? I always chalk that up to a lack of planning. Now, at the end of the day, there are not very many excuses, at least for me, that kind of waive someone's responsibility to showing up to a meeting, or at least communicating that they're not able to show up. So really my expectation, especially in the professional world, is just that communication. There have been plenty of times, and more times than not, if it's not on my calendar, I basically eat, sleep, and breathe by my calendar. Most of what I do throughout the day is planned ahead of time. It's put on my calendar. It's put on a checklist. I make sure to go by that. So more than likely, if it's on my calendar, then I'm showing up. I'm doing it. If for any reason I can't make it and it involves another person, I'm going to communicate that. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to say, hey, something came up. I double booked. I overbooked. Someone else had plans that involved me I was unaware of. Whatever the case may be. But as soon as I know, as soon as I have all that information, I'm going to send an email. I'm going to call them, usually depending on how close it is. If it's a couple days to a week out, I might send them an email. If it's like the next day or the same day, then more than likely I'm going to call them or shoot them a text message. But I'm always going to communicate that, and I'm always going to seek a response so I know the other person is on the same page as well. So on the flip side of that, I want you to think about a time where you have tried to talk to someone and they say, you know, let's get you on my calendar. I'll have you talk to my assistant. Here's my Calendly link. Whatever the case may be, they kind of put the ball in your court to be able to do that, and then it takes you, a month or 2 months to be able to get on their calendar for maybe a 15 to 30 minute call. And in the back of your head, you were just like, oh, that's a little weird. Well, there could be several reasons for it taking so long to get on their calendar, but that is a person who basically plans all of their phone calls every step of their day. And I do my best to do that. However, I do take unscheduled calls. I don't really work in an industry or in a position that really requires me to schedule every single call. Also, if I decided not to take unscheduled calls, I would lose out on a lot of networking opportunities and possibly money. So I don't want to leave business on the table. That's why I take unscheduled calls. But some people are in an industry or a position that requires them to schedule all of their calls. And so they use Calendly is one of my favorites because it's basically your personal assistant as far as your calendar goes, without, you just kind of set it and forget it, so to speak. So you just push that out and then it takes care of the rest. Obviously, there's a ton of other ones out there, but my point is, in sticking to your plan, I have 3 bullet points. I didn't talk about these at the beginning, but don't make exceptions, communicate, and check your calendar and or your checklist often. So in talking about those 2 points of how you've been involved in a meeting where the other person didn't show up and didn't communicate it, and the other example of when someone kind of forced you to get on their calendar just to hold a phone call. Number 1 being don't make exceptions is I don't want you getting in a position where someone 5 minutes beforehand sends you a text message and say, hey, do you have time for a phone call? Now, obviously, if it's mom or, somebody important, then I call them right away. Usually if it's a family member, a close friend of mine, or a veteran, then I'm probably reaching out immediately. Because if they're asking me if I have time for a phone call, then they probably do. So I'm just going to go ahead and call them. However, if it's just somebody who's like, hey, I have a question about this paperwork that you sent over. Do you have time for a phone call? Or maybe someone that you met a week or 2 ago, maybe they're trying to throw you a sales pitch. I've no problems with that whatsoever, especially if it's scheduled, but, in the moment or 5 minutes before you want to talk, hey, real quick, do you have time for a phone call? Don't make an exception to your calendar if everyone else on your calendar put in the effort to be a part of your schedule and was respectful of your time in order to get in that position. This is number 1. Then they are owed that same courtesy and that same respect. And in taking another unscheduled or unplanned phone call or meeting, call, Zoom, Google Meet, in person, doesn't matter. You risk neglecting, because number 1, your brain is going to have to go into this other place for this new meeting that you were not thinking about at the beginning of the day when you planned your day, at the beginning of the week when you planned your week. So you're sacrificing some of your brain power that was reserved for these other people, or even yourself if it's just something that you have to do that doesn't involve anyone else. You're sacrificing a portion of your energy for this other meeting. And then, in any case you try to squeeze it in, you're like, oh, it'll just be 5 minutes. It runs long. It goes 10 minutes. Now you're late for the next meeting. So it's just not very fair to those other people that were respectful and courteous of your time and your schedule and your planning and preparing. And also, it exhausts some of your brain power that you obviously had reserved for those other meetings. So make sure you're not making exceptions. I put communicate on there. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but basically, if you can't make a meeting or you're going to be late, or maybe it was in-person meeting and you need to switch it to Zoom, or it was on Zoom and you want to make it in person, whatever the case may be. Just make sure you call the other people involved, let them know, give them as much heads up as you possibly can. I can't stress this enough. Coming from a military background, of course, a lot of these videos are just recorded in front of my computer, at the beginning of the week or first thing in the morning, and I usually wear a ball cap. However, at the end of the day, I have extremely high expectations of people, especially in the business world. And so if I do ever have someone schedule a call with me, and for one reason or another they don't show up or they don't communicate, I'm probably not going to be as quick to schedule another call with that person. That is in the business world, the professional world, where maybe I'm in a position where I have to talk to that person, or they have to get on my calendar because maybe it deals with one thing or another that can't go on without me. But the point I'm getting at is, as far as the show goes, for example, I have had people schedule to be a guest on Business and Brews show, and for one reason or another didn't show up and didn't communicate. And this is another example of just, pretty much sticking to your plan. So I had a plan, I had episodes scheduled out. Now we are booked out through June. Thank goodness. It's a good problem to have, but I can't make exceptions for people who didn't show up to carve out extra time to accommodate them when other people who did schedule an episode were able to show up. I have too many business owners that want to get on the show, and I would like to provide an opportunity to as many of them as possible. And in doing so, I can't schedule the same business owner twice just because the first time they couldn't show up or they couldn't stick to the plan. So, that's a pretty specific example. It kind of gives you a peek under the hood at how we operate over here at the show. But the last thing I have, and I'm running a bit long, is check your calendar and list often. So the more often you look at it, the less likely you are to forget something or be late. I'm pretty organized when it comes to the events I have taking place throughout the day, especially if it requires me to drive to them. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you learned something and buckle down on your schedule. Once again, if other people are going to respect your time and be courteous of your schedule, then you should at least do the same thing for yourself. Plan it out. Prepare yourself for the day, for the week. Stick to the plan. Make sure you communicate with other people involved and check your calendar and list often. This has been Morning Brews. If you enjoyed this episode, and frankly, even if you didn't, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. You can subscribe wherever you find your podcast, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Facebook. And be sure, most importantly, to tell your friends to subscribe as well. My name is Ryan Smeltz, and I will see you on the next episode of Morning Brews.